So over here, this is just an example of something that has no dimensions. This is just a point. It has no length, no width, nor no height. Now, if we added infinitely many of these points together, we would get a line. Now, this is one dimension. Say an organism lived in this one-dimensional world. All it would be able to do is just move forward and backwards. Now, if we added infinitely many of these lines together, what do we have? We'd have a two-dimensional shape, like this square here. Now, it's only got length and height, but in other words, this organism, if it lived in a two-dimensional plane, it can move left, right, up, and down. Now, what if we added infinitely many of these two-dimensional planes or squares together? What would we get? We would get a three-dimensional object here, so just this cube. Now, this is made up of putting together infinitely many of these two-dimensional squares here. And in doing so, we would create ourselves a cube. Now, this is three dimensions: length, width, and height. And if an organism lived in this plane here, it would be able to move forward, backwards, up, down, left, right. Now, that's primarily because we've added depth into this world here. And this is the world humans live in. And even though we live in a three-dimensional world, sometimes we conceive objects as being two-dimensional. Now, for example, this is a dry erase marker, or a dry erase eraser, and this just looks like a rectangle here. This has got two dimensions, length and height. However, if I just show this object from a different perspective, you can see it has three dimensions: length, width, and height. Now, as a result of this, of course, this is three dimensions, although if we look at it from this angle here, it only looks like it has two dimensions. Now, what if we wanted to add another dimension, and then to get to the fourth dimension? What would we have? Well, we have something like this here. Now, this is known as a tesseract, or it's like a four-dimensional object. Now, humans are not really able to conceive this because we live in a three-dimensional world. So conceiving this sort of four-dimensional object, or in other words, the tesseract, it would be really quite unusual or difficult to do. In other words, for example, it's as if saying that we wanted a two-dimensional figure, or a stick figure, in other words, to understand the third dimension. Since it lives in two dimensions, it really wouldn't understand that. For example, let's say this stick figure here is trapped inside this oval. Now, the stick figure, in being two dimensions, it can only move left, right, up, and down. Now, the problem with this is that it can't really get out because it doesn't really have a third dimension, being height, to sort of like jump out. So as a result, it's basically just trapped in this circle, so it's stuck in there. Now, in a way, that's somewhat similar to how humans can't really understand this fourth dimension because we live in a three-dimensional world. Now, some people say that the fourth dimension is time. However, I find that kind of unusual in that if the previous ideas that I just stated hold true, and that adding infinitely many of the previous dimension will give us another dimension, then time would not really fit the pattern, and in that way, it wouldn't really make sense. And there's another idea I want to touch on, and that's the fact in which, if these ideas hold true, then such things must exist, such as the fifth dimension, the sixth dimension, the seventh dimension, the 100th dimension. And this sort of theoretical idea in my mind is sort of just thinking that in the universe, we live in a three-dimensional world, of course. However, our three-dimensional world is actually inside of a fourth-dimensional world, and then going on and on and on into the 100th dimensional world, and so on and so forth. Well, that's another idea, in that the universe might theoretically actually contain infinitely many dimensions. Now, of course, I don't know whether or not that holds true, although if these previous ideas that I've just gone over are true, then theoretically, our three-dimensional universe is enclosed or inside a four-dimensional world, which is enclosed or inside of a fifth-dimensional world, and so on into the infinite dimension.